Hi folks. As I promised you in the introduction, I wanted to share a couple of additional PowerPoints that we've been using in the On Campus version of the courses. So this is called Powerful Ideas, but for you all it's going to be Powerful Ideas Light. And I'm going to whip through this so that you can get a sense of some of what we're talking about. And a lot of this, I want to make sure I give credit to Barry Corbin, who wrote this book called Unleashing the Potential of the Teenage Brain. As you all know, my teenagers are now 20-year-olds. But at the time I ran across this book, they were still in high school, and I was looking at this and the idea of developing educational plans and trying to do international education for secondary school students. And it's written from the point of view of an educator, so if you're looking for some kind of guide for working with this age group, I recommend it. Okay, so I know these aren't very good to see, and there's two of them, and it's because they've been on my refrigerator for at least 10 years apiece. So this is Garfield and the spider, and the spider says, I have 342 kids, all teenagers. Garfield whacks them with a newspaper, and the spider says, thank you. To which Garfield says, anytime. My second favorite, I think this is called Zits, is the name of the comic strip. And you can see this young man hanging out in a flannel shirt, walking up the stairs, heading to the refrigerator, chowing on a chicken leg in the living room, talking on the family phone, checking his email, drinking a pop and reading a book, scooting down the stairs, and then coming up to his dad, who's holding up the basketball hoop, and says, sorry, did you say you needed pliers or a screwdriver? Those of you who work with teenagers know that this is quite appropriate. Okay, the teenage brain. Both of these links, I just checked. They're perfect, and they'll take you to a public television series on the teenage brain that's absolutely fascinating, and it'll cover what these different parts of the brain are in charge of and how they're developing in a teenager. What we now know with teenagers is that the thinking used to be that brains were developed by the time kids were 5 or 6 years old. What we now know is that the teenage brain isn't fully developed until they're in their mid-20s, which is a huge difference from an educational point of view. There are moments when I would talk to my son and I could see him watching me. He was listening. But the reality was, even though he was looking at me and he was listening, I could see that I could have been talking Russian to him, and it would have had the same impact. It was blowing right past him. It just blew right past him, and it had to do with the executive functioning, the executive function components of his brain. They're just not developed yet, so they don't all connect. And if you tell him that, I'm going to deny that I said it. Okay, so what Barry Corbin did was he took a look at what he considers to be 10 powerful teaching ideas as they relate to the teenage brain. I have expanded that a little bit because I think that a lot of his ideas, while there are specific aspects of them that make sense with the teenage brain, I think they're good educational tools to consider. So, people learn by actively constructing new knowledge based upon their experiences and understanding. So the idea is that you learn when you can add meaning to something. So where do you get meaning? You get meaning from the activities that you've had, that learning by doing piece. And so then it grows, it continues to build on top of each other. You want to establish patterns and connections, and that enhances the meaning. You build on what was there before. Okay, different ways of learning. We always talk about this, right? People have different ways of learning. Every human brain has its own unique design. And because of that, we need to have our learning plans, our learning programs, have a number of different ways to get into the material. And you know this intuitively, and yet in most educational systems, what's rewarded is reading and writing and memorization. And so students who come at learning from other approaches don't get the same opportunity. Okay, people's brains learn best when both sides of the brains are engaged. Like I said, schools overemphasize left brain activities and experiences, so when we're designing our programs, we need to try to engage both sides. Isn't this cool? Can you see that moving around like that? I think that's so cool. All right, multiple memory pathways. I was really struck by this. In the brain, there are 2 periods of time when we are growing neurons and pathways. And then what happens in the teenage years are that if we don't use these pathways, they shut down and disappear. I was really struck by that because of all, you know, as a parent, they always say, make sure your kid does a little bit of everything. Make sure they're exposed to everything. But I didn't really think about why I was doing that. It just sounded like the well-rounded approach to take. But when you think about the fact that if a child doesn't use continually that pathway, it disappears, that's pretty significant. So we need to keep a lot of different avenues open, a lot of different approaches. Connected to this is the idea that learning, becomes profound, becomes part of our brain patterns when it moves from short-term into long-term memory. Okay? So learning is really about moving information into the long-term memory paths. And part of how that happens is repetition. Part of that happens when you're able to make connections to something in your memory. So when we design programs, design activities, when we invite people to do that great reflecting on what you've done before, that helps to solidify it and move it into long-term memory. I hope that makes sense. I realize I'm going through this very quickly. Physical activity and movement greatly enhance learning for the brain. Your brain requires over 20% of the body's blood flow, oxygen, and nutrition. So if you don't let them get up and move things around, it's not going to stick as well because it's just not getting the same kind of flow. We know this, but some of us faculty members, and I know some of you who teach, are guilty of keeping people in their seats just a hair longer than they should be. Okay, memory, learning, and emotion. Memory and learning in the brain can be significantly affected by emotion. We always talk about that a certain amount of stress is good for learning, but too much stress isn't. This speaks to some of that. If it captures someone's attention and engages their emotional connections, they'll hang on to it. It becomes a memory. All right? Okay, idea number 7, people become more effective learners through reflection and self-assessment. Oh, I bet that's why we do this in your program all the time, isn't it? Okay, social. People are social beings, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert on the Myers-Briggs scale. We do learn best in a variety of social environments and social groupings where there's a mix of alone time and group time. People learn best at certain times of the class and after their brains have had a lot of sleep and rest. You know what your best learning time of the day is, but not everybody hits that part of the day at the same time. We have night people, we have morning people, we have not too many, but we do have some after lunch people. So we need to consider who we've got in the room. That's it. All right, I wanted you to get a chance to get all of these ideas out. I think they might be useful as you consider the whole package of readings and assignments for this module. If you're working with high school students, I would strongly recommend taking a look at what the public television links have. Some of them are quite entertaining. And I'll leave it at that. You'll find this on the Moodle site. Enjoy. Bye.